Hi everyone, I'm Kit Rich. Today I am interviewing Dr. Mae Murakami, DPT. She is a physical therapist in Los Angeles, California, specializing in pelvic floor dysfunction, including pregnancy and postpartum care, as well as breast cancer and oncology rehab. Today we talk about healing the pelvic floor. So if you're not even familiar with what the pelvic floor is, this is a great interview to watch. Following this interview, I will be posting a video of exercises to help strengthen your pelvic floor. I hope you enjoy it. I loved interviewing her. And without further ado, please welcome Dr. Mae Murakami, DPT.
Okay,
yay! Hi, Dr. Mae.
Hi, Kit.
Thank you so much for being here and for taking the time to answer some of these questions. I so appreciate you, and I'm so excited for this interview. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you honestly for having me and for, sharing this on your platform to all of your viewers. So I think it'll be really helpful.
So let's get right into it, shall we?
Great.
Okay. Let me first start by saying to the audience, I am very aware that I look like I'm looking down the side. For whatever reason on this computer, it looks that way. I'm looking at Dr. Mae. And she has given me permission, by the way, to call her Mae. So we're going to do that moving forward. So Dr. Mae.
Yes.
What is the pelvic floor?
Yeah, that's a great question because, we've heard of this elusive pelvic floor. You have to do your Kegels. A lot of people don't know much about it. But yeah, let me start by showing you, hopefully you can see on this app. This is kind of a picture of the pelvic floor and how it kind of relates to the rest of your body. So this is, again, your lower spine and your pelvis. And then if I circle up like that, those are actually the pelvic floor muscles. So these are the muscles that we're talking about when we think about the pelvic floor. So you can see that they go from the pubic bone here all the way back to the tailbone on the other side too. And then they also connect to your sit bones muscles. So those are or sit bones. So those are when you're sitting and those bony parts, those are your sit bones. You can see how it fits with the rest of the body in that these are your hips on the side. So again, your inner thighs and your outer thighs, your glutes, all kind of play a role. They all kind of connect to around that pelvic region. And then if we go up again, this would be your lower spine. So again, your deep abdominal muscles, the transverse abdominis we always talk about in Pilates and core training. And then even higher would be the diaphragm. So when we tend to think about pelvic floor function, we can't think about it alone. We have to think of it in relation to all those other muscles, similar to kind of like my water bottle here. So again, the pelvic floor would be the bottom, the diaphragm on the top, and then those deep ab muscles like the transverse abdominis, and then your deep back muscles all kind of work together.
Oh, you're giving a shout out to Pilates right now. I
love
it. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
What does it mean to have a weak pelvic floor?
That is a great question. So oftentimes we just associate a weak pelvic floor with like childbirth. So we're always like, oh, after, you give birth, you're going to have a weak pelvic floor, or we associate it with like urinary leakage a lot of times too. It's hard to say for sure, just because again, a lot of the symptoms we see with a weak pelvic floor can also be indicative of a tight pelvic floor, which we'll get into that later. But oftentimes what we think about is, somebody who's losing urine with laughing, coughing, sneezing, jumping, doing classes like a HIIT class or running, and you're leaking a little bit. Similarly, we can also see it with urge incontinence or urge issues. So if you're someone who is called like a nervous peer growing up, or you always have to have a seat on the end of the aisle, okay. If you had, a seat where, you don't want to be a bother to anybody as you're getting up all the time to go to the bathroom, or if you're afraid you can't finish a whole workout because you're going to be running to the bathroom. So that's what we kind of think about sometimes with a weak pelvic floor. It's not just caused by childbirth, although they have shown that, people who give birth, especially multiple births, can lead to weaker pelvic floor. I have the statistics for you that says 5 to 7 years after delivery, 44.6% of women have some degree of incontinence. So that's a pretty high number.
That is a high number.
Yeah. We can also see The same thing with after menopause. So again, sometimes with menopause, you have decreased estrogen, and estrogen really helps to plump up the urethra and the pelvic floor muscles. So without that, the muscles can also get weak. Now, we also see it with women who have undergone cancer treatments who need medication that helps to decrease their hormones that way too. So sometimes after breast cancer or pelvic cancers, we can see those medications have the same result, and these women are going through menopause, but much younger. You can also see it from pelvic surgeries, abdominal surgeries, even low back surgeries and hip surgeries, because again, it weakens the muscles and the structures around the pelvic floor. And there are just some conditions that we're born with, like Ehlers-Danlos, which is a connective tissue disorder. And so by nature, those people have just weaker muscles or weaker connective tissue.
I so appreciate you bringing that up, because for the most part, I feel like this pelvic floor conversation has only really been tailored to women who have had children.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it is for everyone, because
yes.
like you just said, you can be someone who's never had a child and have a weaker pelvic floor.
Absolutely.
So ways that, you know, for instance, like you just said, possibly leaking, incontinence.
Yep.
Is there ever a time where someone may not be aware that they have a weak pelvic floor?
Absolutely. I mean, again, if you just don't know what to look for, you might not know that you have one. But a lot of times the interesting thing is people think they have strong pelvic floors when they do. And I mean, I'm guilty of this too, because I was Pilates certified because I was, before I was a physical therapist, but we train so much the core, but oftentimes the cue we give is just for the abdomen region. So again, a lot of times people think that they're strengthening their whole core, but really you're just strengthening the abs. And sometimes when you're just strengthening the abs, and you can actually be bearing down and causing more pressure through the pelvic floor. Again, some people
causing more weakness in the pelvic floor.
Yeah.
From that pressure through.
Yes, because if you're bearing down constantly or actually pushing out versus like, again, lifting up, you may actually be putting more strain through there. We actually see that also with sometimes people with chronic constipation or respiratory issues where they're having to cough a lot, because that pressure constantly downwards can cause a weaker pelvic floor, especially if you can't sustain against that pressure.
Wow. Thank you for doing that. So let's talk about some remedies then for it. You know, one of the most popular thing for a weak pelvic floor are Kegels.
Right.
As you know, Sex in the City made it a very popular thing. That scene where Samantha's like, I mean, I'm not going to quote this perfectly, but she's like, I'm doing Kegels right now, you know.
Right.
Yeah. And just for the audience to know, I am doing Kegels right now.
Are you right now? You can't tell, Kit.
Thank you. Well, I am a professional. But okay. No, but let's talk about Kegels. What are they? How do you do them? And could you give us an example of how to do them? So for those people at home who have never done them before, to know how to approach it.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you're just learning about what your pelvic floor is, you probably haven't heard of Kegels yet. But you're right. We do kind of, in certain circles, like, do your Kegels, lady. You know, like we refer it to each other a little bit. And they were supposed to be this like magical exercise that we should all be doing for our pelvic floor. Again, if you're somebody who has more of a higher and tighter pelvic floor, then probably you shouldn't be doing Kegels that can actually make some certain pelvic floor conditions worse. So we like to think of it like a good example I always give my patients is your bicep muscle, right? So you should be able to fully contract and release. And if you're already kind of contracted and then you're doing, you know, Kegels or your contractions, you may not have that much power behind it because you're not getting that full contract and release. But also, again, you're already kind of tight. So you might want to focus more on releasing. But for those of us who do need to do Kegels or want to know how to do them, there are certain cues we give in physical therapy. I'm sure you've heard of these. These are like more of the traditional ones that we've heard about. So like holding in, you know, if you have to go to the bathroom and you're holding it in, either urine or passing gas, those are kind of the same muscles you want to feel that lift. Yeah.
Definitely hold that one in, please.
Yeah. So there's that lift idea. Again, a lot of times people think of a squeeze. I don't like the idea of a squeeze because sometimes that leads to a bulging. I like more of the idea of a lift. So another one we say is like an elevator, starting from that pelvic floor. The elevator is going up kind of through your abdomen all the way up to your rib cage. And then some more fun techniques are, I always like to think of the four corners. So again, that pubic bone, if you remember from that, the picture again. So you have your pubic bone in the front, and then the tailbone in the back, plus those four corners there. And think about almost bringing them together and up. So it's like a lift and up. So you can think of that way too. And then more fun cues are, you can think of the idea of like inserting a tampon and lifting, or trying to lift your pelvic floor up, pick up marbles with your pelvic floor.
Sorry, I have to laugh at that one.
Nope, go for it.
That that one's a good one.
Well, did that do it for the marble?
But you know what, which one I've used, and tell me if you agree with this one. I imagine a hammock where you tie the hammock at the pubic bone and the other side of the hammock at the tailbone. And then I imagine as though I'm lifting the hammock up. Like,
that is it's a beautiful one, because if you saw the pelvic floor, it's like a slinger, like a hammock. Yeah. So yeah, again, whatever gets people to activate their pelvic floor. And again, you don't just have to do your Kegels in a sitting position, although sometimes I like it in sitting, because then you can kind of feel your pelvic floor raised from the seat. But you can oftentimes start lying down. Again, people who have weak pelvic floors, again, sitting and standing against gravity might not be the best way to start to feel it, just because it's a lot harder, right? So as you know, as a trainer too, you know, if somebody's weaker, you don't have them do the heaviest lifting first, you build up.
It's about, well, first and foremost, and I'm sure you would agree with this, it's about getting the connection.
Yes.
I think if lying on your side or on your back allows you to find that connection there, then so be it, right? That's a great place to start. Can I ask you though, there's two thoughts I have that I would love for you to answer. First is how fast, not fast, that's not the right word. How long should you be holding the cable? And can you discuss breath with it? And then secondly, is there such a thing as doing too many Kegels for those who have a weak pelvic floor?
Yes, all of these are so great questions. As we talked about with the core, again, my water bottle core.
That looks like my core. Titanium.
With your core, yeah.
Titanium.
Metal and blue. So yeah, you want to use the diaphragm, because as you inhale, the diaphragm drops down. So practice this right now with me, Kit. So you're going to be seated. And again, when we do our Kegels in sitting, we want to be in a good posture, because again, so much of our society right now is, you know, on our computers, on our phones, we're kind of rounded forward. And that can, again, actually lead to an inefficient pelvic floor length. So always try to do it in a good posture. When you breathe in, your diaphragm is going to drop down. And as the diaphragm drops down, the pelvic floor should expand with it to make room. Your lower abs and your stomach should kind of expand as well. So again, too often we kind of breathe into our chest. So I like to have people put one hand on their chest. Yeah, you can try that. And then one hand on the belly or the lower rib cage. Inhale into that lower hand more so. So it doesn't mean the upper hand can't move, but you want to make sure that that's not the only thing moving. As you inhale into that lower hand, go ahead and turn your attention downwards to the pelvic floor. And you should feel a nice expansion just here with the pelvic floor as well. So you may feel the tailbone open a little bit. Those two sits bones kind of go wider, spread apart. And as you exhale, you should feel the pelvic floor come back up. So that is how we kind of start the movement. And then you can add the Kegel to it. So we like to exhale to bring the pelvic floor back up as well. So that's when you're going to go ahead and do your Kegel.
On the exhale.
Now, on the exhale, yeah. So that's how we start. Again, when you're doing something like running off, you know, like a more dynamic movement, it's a little bit harder. And then, you know, we go into a little bit different variations. But when we're just first learning and when we're just adding it to exercise, the exercises you're going to do, I want you to do the exhale and Kegel at the same time. So that's kind of the natural rhythm of it. Now, your next question was, how many times should we be doing it? How many seconds should we be holding it for? So again, definitely do it with the breathing. On the exhale, again, you can hold for about 10 seconds. So again, our pelvic floor has different types of muscle fibers. Ones are for endurance, and then ones are more for like quick motions, like the laughing, coughing, sneezing. So for the endurance fibers, go ahead and try to hold and lift for that 10 seconds, and then make sure to release. But again, like we talked about, make sure to release fully as well. So you want to have that. Then for the quick flicks, or again, to train for laughing, coughing, and sneezing, you can do kind of a Kegel to help you in that. So those are quick Kegels, and you can do a contraction for about 1 to 2 seconds and then a full release after those as well. And you can do that about 10 times in a row too. So contract fully and relax fully. Again, going up for about a second, release for about 2 seconds. And then finally you asked, can you ever do too many Kegels? This is a loaded question. There's a lot.
I'm saying that because I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, great, I'm going to just do this all day, every day.
All day long now. Yeah.
Yes.
Just, you got to think of it like any other muscle, right? So are you doing your bicep curls all day long? Probably not. No. Oh, are you? Okay. Well, you're the exception then. Good for you. But most people, you know, again, especially if you're just learning, you're just starting out with your Kegels, you know, maybe do 10 reps like in the morning and 10 at night, maybe 10 in the afternoon. But yes, you can do too many because you can actually fatigue out those muscles too. And then you may see your symptoms even more. So again, the idea is to strengthen them without fatiguing them out totally. So they can still, you know, as you saw in the picture, still support you from below, still support all your organs and work for you.
I can hear so many women right now being like, great, just another thing I have to put on my checklist of things.
Right. I like to tell people, especially because we are so busy and, you know, like it's, especially in physical therapy, I hate the idea of like, oh, you know, you got to take an hour and do this. And especially, you know, for the new moms or the ones who have multiple kids already at home and they're like, when do I have time for myself? So, you know, if you're already sitting, like if you're watching TV or driving in a car, even like take that moment at the red light and stop and do it that way.
I can just see it driving in the car. Your theme is podcast and Kegels.
Yeah.
Podcast and do Kegels.
Yeah, do your Kegel.
Sit up tall. So I adore you. I adore you. So let's actually talk about, since we're on the topic of Kegels, and Kegels are such a popular thing as far as like people know but are there exercises that we should be avoiding if we have a weak pelvic floor when exercising? Is there something we should be avoiding? Or do we just add exercises to our regular routine?
Again, all of these are great questions. Everybody is an individual, so, you know, always take that into account. But in general, when we think of like a weak pelvic floor, especially somebody who has like a weak pelvic floor and prolapse, something called pelvic organ prolapse, where the organs are sitting a little bit lower, if you cannot sustain that contraction and you're doing really heavy stuff, like, again, a lot of jumping, where again, if you can't, you know, have that activation to help support you, or even sit-ups. I'm not really a big fan of like the huge sit-ups because again, they really just work like your rectus abdominis and your hip flexors. But again, if you're doing these motions that add increased pressure downwards, but you don't have the stability to maintain those exercises, you could be making some of your symptoms worse, like the prolapse symptoms. Or again, if you notice that you are running or jumping and you're leaking with those exercises, that is probably a sign of pelvic floor dysfunction. So again, know that while it is common, I think I read you that stat, and there's other ones too that say 2 to 60% of people have urinary incontinence, which again is like just, you know, the research is not really there yet. But, you know, just know that there's a lot of people who have this issue. So even though you're leaking, and even though it might be common, know that it's not normal. So
a little off topic though, isn't that so sad that the research isn't there yet?
Yeah. You know, a lot of it, I think, is because women have been around forever. And, you know, we've been having these issues forever. But again, especially when you see like my mom's generation, for example, it was just kind of like, oh yeah, after you know, give birth, you're just going to leak now for the rest of your life, and just, you know, wear a pad or a diaper and go about your day. And I think the younger, like nowadays with you know, social media and the internet and people like you who are disseminating this information, it's like, hey, did you know we don't have to live this way anymore? So
and you don't just have to deal.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Or to ignore what's happening or feel shame about it or pretend.
Yes.
Right. And I think that the more that we talk about these things and normalize them, the better off we'll be, and the more we can heal. And it's very empowering to know that you can change what you thought was just fated. If you have children, this is what's meant to be.
Yeah,
right?
this is absolutely.
I mean, even just the fact that you were just talking about the pelvic floor in the sense of like there's like almost fast twitch fibers and slow twitch fibers.
You got it. Yeah.
That is a normalized, the normalized terminology when we talk about long distance running
other muscles
or sprinting. But the fact that you even just spoke about it in that way, I mean, it's just, I feel very hopeful for our future and for women's health research. Let's talk about, you mentioned tight pelvic floors. Now this is way less talked about than weak pelvic floors. First of all, how does someone obtain a tight pelvic floor? How do you know if you have a tight pelvic floor?
So yeah, again, great questions. Sometimes you don't know that you have a tighter pelvic floor as well. And again, a lot of times, I think, especially in our culture, we're like, well, isn't it a good thing to have a tight pelvic floor? You know, like, doesn't it? And definitely having a good functioning pelvic floor can help you with so many things. However, there definitely can be conditions, and we won't get into too much detail about it. But the pelvic floor muscles kind of hold tight. They're kind of in a spasm and they don't let go. So these are people who have then the muscles are so tight, they can actually have stuff like urinary hesitancy, where they can't really go to the bathroom or it takes a long time. They can also have pelvic pain syndrome. So they may have pain with sex. They may have pain with insertion of a tampon, so they can't do that, or even OB/GYN visits. Like, it's just very, very painful. And so we see that as well. They can also actually have urinary incontinence with a tighter pelvic floor. So there was a study done, or actually a survey, on elite female athletes, and the mean age was about 22.8 years. So these were young women who had never given birth. And it was sports like gymnastics, volleyball, and basketball. And a lot of them surveyed said that they leaked while doing their activity. Now, do they have like a weak pelvic floor? Probably not, right? These women are at the top of their game. They're strong in every way. Again, they probably had, a tighter pelvic floor that wasn't able to sustain the pressure differences when they're doing their jumping or running or tumbling. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is that there is some correlation between exercising and a tight pelvic floor, but to the degree that it gets too tight where it can become uncomfortable. So then,
absolutely.
So then, real quickly, what are some simple ways to release the pelvic floor? Is it just sitting?
I'm sorry, say it again.
What are some ways to release a tight pelvic floor?
So again, we always start following the breath. So a lot of times when I do an exam on someone, you'll notice that when they're doing their inhaling and exhaling, how we practiced before, how that pelvic floor should move, their pelvic floor is actually not moving at all. So again, even just starting there can be so, so powerful. And then a lot of the other stretches and stuff that we try to give, you are actually very well versed in. A lot of them are kind of yoga-based moves to help kind of stretch the inner thighs and the glutes and all the muscles that surround it, along with the pelvic floor.
That's so, just for the viewers that are watching this right now, Mae has been so kind to give me exercises that I'm going to do a video. So you'll see a video that's coming soon after this of ways to strengthen a weaker pelvic floor. Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't remember if we do any stretches to release the pelvic floor.
I think in this video, you're just going to show people the strengthening moves for now, but we can happily, I'll show you that another time. Yeah.
But yeah, in general, hip stretches would
are great.
Beneficial. And I actually do those a lot in my videos, very gentle hip stretches, because I'm very aware of everything you're talking about. Let me ask you something. There are so many women who have had kids 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and they have always had problems with their pelvic floor. Is it ever too late to strengthen your pelvic floor?
It is not. It's never too late. I've had women in their 80s coming into the clinic. So they're, it's never too late to work on this. Don't think that all hope is lost, even if you've had this issue for a long time. There's still so much that we can do to help you. So yeah.
I love hearing that. And the exercises that I'm going to be giving in the video, those are not just for women who are postpartum.
Mm-hmm.
They are safe, assuming you've spoken to your doctor, they are safe for women who are pregnant and for people who have just weak pelvic floors, who never anticipate having children, and also for women who anticipate having children, these are great exercises for them to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The only maybe two that I would point to that, again, you want to get the okay, or maybe not be so great yet, is you're going to do a bridge exercise. So again, when you're lifting your hips up, when you're pregnant, kind of past that first trimester, that second trimester is kind of an iffy period for that. And then the third trimester, probably you don't want to be lifting. The other one where you're kind of doing the slider in, that also depending on if you have pelvic girdle issues, or again, if you're a little bit more lax during the pregnancy, might not feel great in the moment. But for the most part, almost all the exercises you're going to do are safe for any period.
Thank you for correcting me on that. I forgot one of the exercises was the bridge.
Yeah.
I appreciate you correcting that. Is there
and I do want to say, oh, go ahead.
I was about to say, is there anything I left out? And you're about to say, and I do want to say, so go.
Well, the only thing with the exercises as well that I wanted to point out is because, again, too often we just think about doing the Kegels. But again, since we saw those pictures and we know that the pelvic floor is now part of a larger, structure with the whole body, all of these are exercises that you can do. And some of them are even exercises where you're not necessarily Kegling, but you're working the pelvic floor with balance and other things like that too. So more fun ways to work it.
I would like to invite people who do because a lot of people who train with me know that I do a lot of Pilates inspired exercises. I work transverse a lot. I work the internal external obliques a lot, the abductors, the adductors, and the glutes, the lats, all things that help support the hips and the spine. And so I would encourage those people who do my videos and if they find that they have a weaker pelvic floor, to include this video as well as a regular program. So thank you so much, Mae, for this time. So Mae often, to those watching, Mae often gives talks. I believe that she's giving one soon, April 14th. Am I correct?
15th. Tax day in America, yeah.
April 15th, 2021. In the link below, in the info below, I will leave all of her information. So if you want to find her and sign up, it's a free seminar, yes?
It's going to be a free talk on, again, pregnancy and postpartum conditions. So, I mean, this was a little intro session, but know that we'll get into more detail about things that can happen during that time, like pelvic organ prolapse, pelvic girdle pain, pain with sex postpartum, what you can do for episiotomy scars, C-section scars, urinary incontinence. So all of the fun things that can happen during that time period.
Well, Mae, you are a very inspiring woman, and
thank you
for taking the time to educate us all. And and I know someone out there is going to benefit from this so much. I definitely did today. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Yeah, I just wanted to say, as a final parting, thoughts, that definitely, like, if you're out there and you have been suffering from any of these conditions that we've been talking about, and you didn't know where to turn, know that you're not alone. Again, the research shows that, what research we have shows that it is a very common issue. And I mean, again, a lot of times we don't talk about it. So for example, like Kit was telling me earlier, her knee had been hurting and she got PRP injections for it. And that's, we talk about that with other, like our ortho conditions, or, if you have neck pain, you're like, oh, I went to see this chiropractor or that acupuncturist or this physical therapist. I tried this cream and these exercises. But the pelvic floor region, you kind of hit on it, Kit, was, it's embarrassing. There's a lot of shame, I think, that surrounds it, and just a lot of misinformation. So we tend not to talk about it, and we think that we're alone in the world with these problems, but know that you're not alone. And please, make pelvic floor PT part of your rehab team, as well as, your urologist, your gynecologist, your urogynecologist. So just know that we all are here to help you.
And I will keep that. I love that you are not alone ever, but especially when it comes to this topic. Thank you, Mae. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful day. Mwah.
You too. Bye.